So, Prime Minister Heger, I guess I can still call you that. You were Prime Minister until middle of last year. So, very warm welcome to Hudson.
Thank you.
And a warm welcome, of course, to all of our viewers online, as well as, of course, those who've joined us in person. My name is Matt Boyse. I'm a senior fellow here, focusing more on Central Europe and eastern flank of NATO. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for stopping by. Just a housekeeping issue or two before we launch into the conversation. So what we'll do is we'll have a 10-minute or so kind of opportunity for you to share your thoughts on your prime ministership and how you dealt with the Ukraine issue and other challenges, whatever you decide you want to talk about. And then we'll proceed to the conversation, and then there'll be some opportunity for people to ask some questions should they wish to do so. But anyway, you're not a stranger to the United States. You've lived here, you've worked here. I saw somewhere that you were involved with a spirits company called Old Nassau,
yes.
which reminds me of Princeton. But anyway, I wonder if there's any connection to that. And it was sort of an interesting double cross. So I hope you were. That's a vodka defense firm. When you were in, then you, of course, in Slovakia, you became an MP and shadow finance minister. You in the opposition after the 2016 elections. You then. After the 2020 elections, you became finance minister and deputy prime minister, and which was a bit of bad luck because COVID sort of hit you pretty quickly, and you had to deal with all the challenges that entailed, and that must have been kind of a rough period, and of course it was a bit of a turbulent period. Which was one of the reasons you became prime minister a year or so later, and where you, of course, had to deal with not only the continuing COVID issue, but you also had to deal with Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and so you had no shortage of challenges. But you acquitted yourself quite well, given all of this, the bad cards you were dealt for 2 years. So, but now, of course, you're in opposition and outside the government, and we're sort of. Could you tell us a little bit about sort of what it was like during your prime ministership and how you view how you dealt with the Ukraine problem, the Putin problem? As well as sort of how you look at that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for coming and looking at this discussion. And I really want this to be a discussion. So I'm very open to your questions afterwards or your comments. And I'll just very briefly to basically do an introduction and share with you the view from that part of the world at the whole situation with Ukraine. And as you said, I mean, our election term that started March 2020 actually started with the COVID, and it was ever since we were in crisis. So I don't really know how is it to run a country outside of crisis, because we were facing always new and new. And just to show you the extent, we were just about to finish with COVID. On the 26th of February, me and my Minister of Health were preparing this great press conference where we would step up in front of the whole country and say, dear fellows Slovaks, we're finishing with COVID and no more measures, etc. But on the 24th, as you know, 2 days earlier, the war at Ukraine started. So nobody was interested in that kind of press conference, of course, because we were dealing with a flood of people coming from Ukraine, mostly mothers with children, who were really fleeing the way that they didn't pack anything. The kids at the border, I would be coming to the border every 2-3 days, wouldn't have any shoes, freezing out, and really we were trying to help them. And I'm very proud of the citizens of Slovak Republic who were coming from the very first moment to the border and helping with accommodating them, providing food, providing all necessary tools that these mothers with children mostly needed. And just so you understand the whole estimate, when we were meeting as a government with the Security Council, the whole estimate that around 50,000 people during the whole aggression would come through the eastern border. Well, that happened after 4 days. And in total, actually, 1 million of Ukrainians went through the Slovak-Ukrainian border. Of course, many went to other countries in Europe, and several 10 or 100,000 stayed in Slovakia for a certain time. But yeah, so I'm very thankful to the citizens of Slovak Republic how much they helped. But on the other hand, it's very important. I'm glad that we can have this discussion here today, because as we see that there are being open new questions how to approach the situation in Ukraine. And I want to remind all of us the basic principles and the pillars and what this conflict is about. Because sometimes when you walk down the path, there might be fatigue occurring, etc. And you stop thinking about the basic principles. And what we saw on the 24th, when it started, and we had the information, nobody really wanted to believe, right? Because we saw Vladimir Putin, how he was sending thousands and thousands of soldiers to the borders. And we thought, like, okay, this is only just to scare Europe, or basically he wouldn't really go after it. But when it happened, of course, there was a summit in Brussels, and we all came in, and I remember the words of Volodymyr Zelensky, who was on the screen and was asking for any help. And we knew that it's very difficult for us to get the unity so quickly and act, because he asked, please make me a member of EU, or help me in any possible ways. So that meeting was basically finishing with his words where he said, well, thank you, I have to go now, and if I don't see you, then thank you. Basically, he was leaving, and we felt like, wow, are we going to meet him? Are we going to see him next morning? Is he going to survive that night? Because it was such a strong attack, as you remember, on Ukraine. And I remember the debate. We were just informally speaking with other prime ministers and trying to figure out, like, okay, how this is going to end, how long they can actually last. And I must say that the best estimates would be maybe a month. Nobody would ever expect that actually over 700 days they would be still fighting for their freedom, fighting for their territorial integrity, which is to a certain extent a miracle. And the reason why I'm saying that, because I see and I hear a lot of discussion now where we want to be too pragmatic. But if we would be pragmatic right very after, then probably we would never do so many sanction packages, we would not provide so much help, and probably by now they wouldn't be fighting for their freedom anymore. So, and what they do, what I think the Ukrainian people do, and the leadership, what they do, they showing us great courage. They showing us leadership in understanding what is this all about. Because when you listen, and we were listening to Vladimir Putin's words very closely, what he was saying right afterwards, how he wants to increase or basically regain the zone of influence to the times before 97, before Slovakia joined NATO, etc. It was kind of scary, because, you know, we are a free country. And in a free country, the citizens have the right to choose their destiny, right? I think we would agree on this. And if they have the right to choose the destiny, then that's what they need to do. And no other country should come and say, well, you can choose your destiny unless it's this. Then it's no more freedom. So, briefly said, so from what we see, it's not just a question of Ukraine, because we are a neighboring country. And somebody might say, okay, for you, and of course for us, it's very important that each of our neighbors is a prosperous and democratic country. Because it makes a big difference if we have a Ukraine that is a modern, developed, free, and democratic country, or if we have Russian tanks on the eastern border. We know what it means, Iron Curtain. We experienced it till 1989, and we saw what it looked like on the other corner. I'm from Bratislava, the capital city, and we knew how Austria, the end of Austria looked, how it looked when we were having this Iron Curtain. So we definitely don't want to have a military zone on the eastern border where people now living in the villages or cities, they would be part of the military zone, because if you have Russian tanks, you have to behave, of course, differently. So we would rather have a very open border with Ukraine and prosper for the citizens who know each other. I mean, there's a lot of history in that part, and it could definitely bring a lot of prosperity to the eastern part of Slovakia that's been neglected by governments in the last 3 decades in Slovakia. So for this perspective, for economic reasons, it makes very much sense that Ukraine becomes free and democratic and keeps its democracy and freedom. But what is more important is the security issue. The security issue, not just for Slovakia, because we are part of Schengen, we are part of NATO as well, we are part of Eurozone, but for the whole Europe. Because we have to understand and we have to look at this as a fight of values, because that's what it really is. It's basically breaking the international treaties. It's not respecting the territorial integrity, which is very dangerous. Which is, once we stop respect the territorial integrity, then what else is going to be there, right? These are the basic principles of who we are, what we have. So therefore, I think it's so crucial to always, when we speak about the details of the progress or any situation we look at, we always have to look at the foundation and the principles our societies stand on. And this should be our kind of guiding star, I would say the North Star, for us to, in any debate, always check whether I didn't go away from the basic values that our free societies are built on and based on. And I see it, Slovakia is now under strong, or it's been under strong propaganda, Russian propaganda, after the war started. Our government, our military intelligence was able to discover and basically record and catch a Russian agent who was bribing a reporter of an alternative media, cash, and was basically discussing how they will deliver more money for them to write the messages that they needed to be written. And this is just one of the example, after which we then expelled 33 diplomats, I don't know if that's the proper word, but embassy employees, yes, thank you. Out of Slovakia. We had to do all kinds of measures because such a strong propaganda started. I actually had to meet with the representatives of social platforms, of also Meta, where we were discussing, because the people are under such a strong attacks that it's causing, it's not just causing opening a lot of discussion, debate, but we see that some of the people are really being frustrated. They very much go into depression and seek health assistance or medical assistance. So it's kind of, I would say, increasing the healthcare bill, very simply said. So these are the challenges that we were going through. And the last problem that we saw is that some of the politicians were taking these narratives, these messages, bringing it into the public debate. And there is strong pressure to kind of revive the optimism or kind of looking at the regime, the communist regime, as something that was good for us, which is always scary. And there was one of the surveys where in a democratic country, people, more than 50% of the people said that they would appreciate to have an authoritarian leader, which always, again, it's a message, it's scary. People living in democracy want to have an authoritarian leader. So you have to always watch out when these kind of messages start to appear. So this is just brief understanding on the situation that is happening in Slovakia and in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the messages that you can hear now from Slovakia, from the government of Slovakia, are rather welcoming any kind of peace for Ukraine. But again, this trap has been there when I was Prime Minister, and not about any kind of peace, but it must be a just peace and a peace agreement. But especially, it must be a peace agreement that is driven by the people of Ukraine, because it's their country that is being invaded. And it's always, again, if we cherish freedom and democracy, then it cannot be told to the people of that country what to do. It could be advised or not recommended, I wouldn't go there, but definitely it should be them who need to decide what's their destiny, again, if we cherish the freedom of the country. So, and therefore, when I hear the debate that let's speak about any kind of peace, I don't agree. I think if we want to speak about peace, it must be driven by the people of Ukraine and by the leadership of Ukraine, because that's fair, that's just, and that's the way to do it. And I think last point I make, and then let's open it for the debate. You know, this is actually a lesson that we go through and that we are part of for the times ahead, for our children, for our grandchildren, because this kind of brutal attack of a country on a democratic country, on a democratic government, as we see what Vladimir Putin did, and on the size of a country, if we allow the history to record that we didn't respond properly, then the future generations will see it might be okay. It might be okay to act like this. And we should, I think, we owe to the history a record where we say, no, this is not okay, and don't even dare to think to act like this again, ever again. So this is the fight we fight right now. We fight for the values, and we fight for the respect to these values. Because if we respect these values, then we're going to stand for them. If we lower our fight for these values, then we basically show we don't respect them as much. And the people who don't respect them at all, they will abuse it. They will abuse it, and it won't stop. So, and here.
No, that's good. I wanted to pick up on a couple of those points you made. Because this, the point of principle, because your government was exceptionally supportive of Ukraine and admired for it and respected for it highly. I mean, your decision to turn over your entire MiG-29 fleet, for example, all 13 to the Ukrainian government was just symbolized that. Not to mention the ammunition and all the rest of it, and armored personnel carriers, et cetera. I mean, it's sort of you did an awful lot given your situation. And because not only out of principle, as you say, but also because I think I once read somewhere that you said if Ukraine falls, Slovakia is next, or something along those lines. Yes. You would become a neighboring state to a Putin-dominated dictatorship, whatever, to Putin to control Ukraine, which is of course obviously not in your national interest. And you were one of the first. You were in that first group of leaders who visited Bucha after the Russians withdrew from there. So that was, I mean, you were really up there on the sort of Slovakia under while you were there was up there at the very towards the top of those who were engaged. And I remember then during the election campaign. That last fall, then opposition leader Fico, who's now prime minister, campaigned on this whole notion of not one bullet or not one shell or whatever, for Ukraine, and since becoming, and you alluded to this briefly. Since he's been prime minister, he's sort of walked back that a little bit, and some people are calling this sort of the new pragmatism. And he met with the Ukrainian prime minister not in Kyiv, but in Zakarpattia, in the sort of sort of on the border with Slovakia. So he's walked back some of that rhetoric, which of course helped get him elected because he kept banging that drum. But it is interesting. So I mean, how should we understand the foreign policy of the Fico government, given all the rhetoric, the pro-Putin rhetoric, the sort of talk about peace, which of course everybody wants, but not on Putin's terms, and the Ukrainians, it's their decision. So how are we supposed to understand
Yeah.
the government of of Slovakia these days?
Well, thank you for the question, and if you don't mind, I will go step by step, because you mentioned how we provided MiG-29s. We also were, I think, the first country that provided air defense system, our S-300, to Ukraine, which was, till today's date, is still saving a lot of lives of Ukrainian people. But you know, we were the opposition, and not just the political opposition, but the pro-Russian opposition basically was blaming us that we are more pro-Ukrainian than we are pro-Slovak. But this was, you know, on one side, this was help to your neighbor, right? If he's in need, help him, because you don't know when you're gonna need it back. And actually, Slovakia went through Second World War, and in Slovak uprising, we were in very similar situation, and we were crying out for help, and there were allies who came to help us. So we kind of owe this to the history of those who helped us during the uprising, that we kept the principles of helping the neighbors, so we just honor this principle. But on the other hand, it's also an investment. And this is what we forget, that any help provided to Ukraine at this moment, it's an investment into our values, as we spoke at the beginning, into our security, which is very much needed, even now, but also into our prosperity. Because if you look at Ukraine, the size of 30, 40 million country, and as a market, as an economy, and as the whole rebuilding, it's going to be an accelerator of any economical growth in Europe, but everybody, the whole Western world or any country will benefit of it. So we have to see all these sides: the human, the will to rescue and help your neighbor, but also the security and the economical. So that's why I was glad that we were doing this. And you know what I miss today in the politics, that the politicians try to kind of instantly resolve the problems, but they don't think strategy. And then we don't really know where we go, because we don't have a goal, we don't have a vision. Yeah, we do have in Europe 2050 that will be carbon neutral, but is that all? I mean, what else we want in 2050? What kind of world do we want to live in? What is the life we want to have for our kids and our grandchildren? So this kind of vision, I think, is missing. And even though it's being said many times, we don't act according to this vision. So that's why I think we have to have in a debate, whenever we speak about any detail, like we're going to go in a minute, what kind of politicians say about resolving the issue in Ukraine. We have to think that what the decision, whether it's pro the vision, or it's going to lead us away from the vision, or it's going to create some new vision that we don't even speak of. And maybe if we would put it as a order of steps, we'll go like, oh, this is not the vision we want. So let's not even go there. And that's why we don't test our decision toward this vision, because we don't name. And when you ask about Robert Fico and his rhetorics and his foreign policy, well, you know, in Slovakia, he introduced, I think it was him who introduced this foreign policy of four, well, I apologize for not knowing the English terms, like north, south, east, and west. We are everywhere, like we go everywhere. We want to be, I don't know, peacemaker, but I don't think really this is what it works in a foreign policy. I never saw anybody speaking like him. But to me, what it seems, it's like creating this fog where you can get lost. And that way, I have the advantage of leading you. And these politicians, to me, they don't have a vision. They don't want to bring country anywhere. They just like to be in power. And we have to understand that being in power, it's for a reason. It's not for enjoying the power. It's for a reason that you serve the people. I mean, in democracies, people elect us to lead the country for the better life of the people. But we don't see it more, I would say, in some corners of the world, we don't see that the leaders bring the country to a better place. So when he started, and again, what we understood that he needs to gain, he wanted to get in power because that's why he needed to gain all the political capital. Okay, politically, it makes very much sense. And that's why he would go, and the rhetorics would go very much far right. Now, he cannot lose that rhetorics now, but with the action, he's actually doing the opposite. Like he said, we're going to stop any help to Ukraine. We're going to send them just basically blankets and tea, if I would be make it simple. But they need, besides the humanitarian, they also need the military. So I'm glad that he didn't stop and he didn't block the help of European Union or the countries of European Union toward Ukraine. He basically wasn't against the 50 billion package for Ukraine, which includes also military. He didn't stop the sales of weapons and ammunitions that are being produced in Slovakia toward Ukraine, etc.
By the private sector and separately, without the government necessarily being involved.
Yeah,
which is
I mean, of course, but you know,
a distinction without much of a difference, or what?
That's the tactics of these politicians. You know, that they use these little words just to make appear that I'm basically faithful to my words, that I'm going to stop the help to Ukraine. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's what it was for most of the part under my government as well, because I mean, we had to buy new ammunition for our armed forces, and because there was, I mean, the ammunition of the 155, 152 millimeters for the artillery of Ukraine, there is not as many because nobody really prepared for this kind of size of conflict. So they were pretty much gone. So everything we were giving was already newly produced, and since European Union is funding it, so we were reimbursed. So it wasn't really that we're giving out of our own stock.
But I could just drill down on it. So ammunition and more shells are going to Ukraine from Slovakia.
Absolutely.
And so the promises he made to his voters or whatever are kind of out the window, or he's looking the other way or whatever.
He needed to get back to power.
Yeah.
And he would promise anything just to get there. Now that he's in the power, he starts to explain his voters that, you know what, actually, we have to adjust a little bit, and yeah, we need to help them. But don't worry, we're not going to do it out of the public funds. We're going to do it through the private companies because they pay for it. Well, we were reimbursed for everything we donated. So it's the same. It went through the government, it went outside of the government. We're reimbursed before as well. So he's kind of, abusing the words in order to pretend that he's doing something what he promised. But on the other hand, it's good that he's not stopping the help, because it's an investment. It's an important investment. So I'm glad that he's investing into the future of our region as well, even though pretending that he's not.
Yeah.
I mean, going for a visit with an official of neighboring country and really offend him with all possible offenses that you can on national radio and then press conferences. I mean, what kind of diplomacy, what kind of foreign policy this is? Spit somebody into face and then go shake his hand and say like, oh, you know what, we're going to help you. Of course, Ukraine.
So that meeting with Prime Minister Smer was good that it took place. Bad that it didn't take place in Kyiv with Zelensky. But so he was sort of splitting the difference and offending his Ukrainian host in the process.
If just imagine you are in trouble and your neighbor, and you are in trouble, you need help of anybody. Then of course you would even allow somebody to spit in your face and then go meet him, because you are so humble and you just understand, you see the strategy, you have certain aim. But it's just very rude. And if we allow that this is going to be the means of foreign policy, if needed, then again, I mean, what is it? You miss the respect. You miss the respect toward dignity, and again, going not to Kyiv because it's practical. Okay, then let's change it. Let's not meet. Leaders don't meet in capital cities. Meet always at the border, because it's practical. You travel half of the way. He travels half of the way. Let's have these conference rooms and at the border of the countries, and let's just change that because it's practical. Yeah, it's practical. Yeah, so
further on Ukraine, so your president, President Chaputova, she was just in the States until a few days ago. She had to leave because she had got COVID, unfortunately. She was on the West Coast, and she was exceptionally supportive as well of Ukraine, and got a lot of credit for that. It was sort of, I guess, her trip here is a little bit of a swan song because she's not going to run for re-election. And your elections are next month, 23rd of March, the first round. She unfortunately didn't get a visit or even a drop by in the White House, which I think is actually kind of really a bit a shame. I mean, very unfortunate, because for all the support that she has provided to her Atlanticism, her support for the bilateral relationship, that was exceptional, and she deserved, I think, a stop in the White House, even to visit the vice president, and a 5-minute drive by for them. I mean, for all that, you'd think that she would have deserved that. I think but anyway, she didn't, and so unfortunately, and now she's back in Slovakia. But she is running. She's not running for re-election, partially because because of her support for Ukraine. She was vilified for it, which is very nasty stuff. But now we're sort of facing a presidential election, which is next month, which is and you've got 11 candidates. Last time I checked, all men. Now there are two front runners, one being the former Prime Minister Pellegrini, and the other being former ambassador in Washington, Ivan Korchok, as well, who's then was promoted to foreign minister because he did a great job here, represented your country with very professionally and very effectively. They're the two front runners. There's not an awful lot of difference between at least last time I checked the polls, to the extent that they're correct. There's a sort of, not that, a couple points difference between the two, but there are so many other candidates. It's going to go to a second round, presumably, in April, April 6th. So, I mean, would you venture any kind of predictions? How's this going to play out? You have all these other candidates who are going to take votes away from the two front runners. One is a center left, and then one center right. Are the good people of Slovakia going to give both the prime ministership and the government to Smer and to the presidency as well, to a Smer aligned politician, so that the entire government will be left of center and be able to solidify their control over your country? Or what will the good people of Slovakia do?
Well, any thoughts? Yeah, last 3 years taught me that nothing is guaranteed.
Right.
Even though something looks like it might be an easy win, nothing is guaranteed. There is a lot of surprises that happened in the last 3 years, in a good way, in a bad way. So I need one disclosure. I mean, I'm a former prime minister of the coalition that is now in opposition. So you need to understand what I speak. I speak sometimes very politically, and it might be the essence of my view on the issues. So sometimes maybe you need to filter it, because you might seek more objective view. I'm trying to be as much as objective as I can, but yes, sometimes, of course, this political view is part of it. Well, when we speak of the presidential election, again, I'll try to give you some facts and some history, so you can make up your own mind. But right now, in favor is Peter Pellegrini, former prime minister, after Robert Fico had to step down in 2018. Don't know whether you know. There was an assassination of investigative reporter in Slovakia in 2018. Very sad story. He was writing about corruption affairs of that government, Robert Fico's government, and he just murdered. He just killed at his house with his fiancée. Shot. Very, very bad story. And as a result, Robert Fico was pushed to step down by the coalition partner, and Peter Pellegrini became the prime minister. And they ran to the government, to the elections 2020. Peter Pellegrini was the leader, but since they didn't win the elections, then Peter Pellegrini left the party and founded his own party. And that was since the last election. They didn't make Robert Fico won the elections. Peter Pellegrini was third. So and now, since before a year ago, he said that, I'm still young. I don't see myself in the president's seat, because I want to serve the country till I'm young in the executive positions. So, but he didn't win the election, so he went for the Speaker of the Parliament, and now he feels like he's probably not that young anymore, that he needs to go for the president. So he's running. But since the coalition won the elections, so you have kind of after the elections still, you have the atmosphere of people who voted for the election and you have majority. So it's a good prerequisite, I would say, to become the president, especially if the government is power and is subsidizing the people. And they spend a lot of money to subsidize the people and to solve all the problems. Still, he becomes the president. I think then, after they have all the seats, then things will probably change. They will not spend so much on the people as we saw in the past when they were in the government. So for Ivan Korčok, as a career diplomat, very experienced man, served the country since 90s, since he got into the service. And he went through all the important positions in the diplomacy. And he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs as not a member of a party, like an expert member of the party, member of the government. He was the foreign minister, and now he's running as a civilian candidate for president. I think the only actually possible candidate to beat Peter Pellegrini. You have to understand, in Slovakia, many times they say that president is only a representative role. Well, to a certain extent is, but out of constitution, it's got several, not many, few, but very important competences. It can give amnesty to anybody, as we know. He appoints the Constitution Court judges. He of course, vetoes the legislation, etc. But just these first two that I mentioned are crucial because we know Robert Fico, one day he tried to be, also he appoints the head of the Constitutional Court. And Robert Fico in the past wanted to become the head of Constitutional Court. And you know that there was a lot of, just last thing I tell you about the Slovak situation. After our government came in place, there was a lot of affairs, corrupt affairs, and the government would say, no, there's no corruption in the government. So we said to the police, you are free to investigate whatever you want. They started to investigate, and now we have over 40 people who basically are convicted, and they themselves said, they confessed that, yes, I was part of the corruption scheme, and they actually described how the corruption scheme functions. So if you have a president and you can provide amnesty to anybody and you can basically guarantee your friends and colleagues that they will, whatever they will be charged of, they won't go to prison. So this is very, you should have there a person with morale who will not abuse this competence and this office. And we are not sure whether Peter Pellegrini would be that kind of person. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, that leads me to actually what I wanted to ask you next, which was the fact that the U.S. media doesn't report about Slovakia that much, but it did. There were some reportage prior to the election was sort of focusing on Robert Fico, who was in an opposition, who was leading in the polls, and sort of wondering, well, where would he, if he wins, take Slovakia? And now there's a lot. Now the coverage on Slovakia in the U.S. or in the English language media tends to be a little bit more along the lines of his domestic policies, because we've been seeing stories of tens of thousands of people on the streets of cities of your country protesting his attempts to get rid of the prosecutor. And which of course has to do with rule of law and justice issues, judicial issues, and the extent to which the corruption cases that you were referring to would be prosecuted, whether they would or would not, et cetera. And so you have, and then of course there's a related sort of theme in the English language media having to do with his kind of the affinity that he is showing to your neighbor to the south, and the Prime Minister of Hungary. And even though they represent different sides of the political spectrum, there are certain affinities there. And the question is, like, what does this mean? So how are we supposed to understand his domestic policies in terms of, I mean, the rule of law issues, and of course the EU went after Hungary, has been going after Hungary now for quite some time on rule of law issues. They have actually they've been going after the government of Poland as well. Are they going to go after Fico because of the various things or how, what are we going to see there? Any thoughts?
Again, in the campaign, the politicians' campaign, they explain or they introduce their program. So Robert Fico says, and Peter Pellegrini, because they are now in the coalition, they say, we're gonna deliver you lower prices of groceries. We're gonna lower the prices of the energies, even though they haven't grown because we were subsidizing them, just because we're so vulnerable. And we're gonna help you with the mortgages, and we're gonna do something about the judiciary system. Don't worry, it's not gonna be anything important. So 3 key messages. One, little bit. The election happens, they form a coalition. What happens? What's the biggest priority? We have to fix the judiciary system as first. Then we'll deal with the prices of the groceries and energy bill. Okay, we just keep it at the level as it was the year before because it's easy. Everything was introduced by our government. So it shows you what are his real priorities. And the real priorities is, because it's not just that he's after the special prosecutor. Yes, he is. He says that. But he's going to actually take the whole special prosecutor office out. Tomorrow is the voting on the second reading. Very express way he put it into parliament. That's why the European Commission says, hold on. If you want to do any reform, there needs to be a public debate. Let's hear the experts what they say. European prosecutor says, if you do it, you're going to break the agreements between Slovakia and European Union. So, but the reason why he's doing that, because the special prosecutor office has still 100 cases in pipeline that are heading to the special court. And he doesn't want these people to be convicted. He doesn't want to be, these people go to the prison because those are his former nominees, close friends. And he knows that those people who are in prison, he doesn't want to keep speaking about how the system worked. So he needs to dismiss these cases to regular prosecutors. Most likely some parts of the 10,000 pages cases will get lost and nobody will put it ever together, which means this is gone. It's over. And they're changing the criminal code in a way that they, like, let's say now you would have for several thousands of euros, you would be already convicted of a criminal act if you were bribed. Now it's going to be up to 700,000 euros, etc. So he's messing up with the charges, and he's lowering the time when you can still look at this as a crime, or it's. I apologize. I don't know what's the right term when it expires.
Statute of limitations.
Yes, that's exactly. So he's lowering it from 10 years to 3 years. So you cannot be investigated anymore. Basically, everything that they done till 2020 will not be able to investigate anymore. So this is his aim. And if you look at it from this perspective, then when you ask me what is his politics, well, his politics is just to guarantee that he will never go to prison. That's all he cares. And everything else is just the instrument to do it. Foreign policy, domestic policy, whatever. That's my opinion, that this is his goal, and quite a lot of people in Slovakia think that too. That's why so many people is at in the cities protesting, because this is not a reform of judiciary system. This is not a reform of prosecutor. It's just really aimed at protect him and people who are close to him, that they will never go to prison, whatever they do. So
well, it seems like a very sort of open and shut case. I mean, a very clear case of what he wants to do. In the case of some of the other rule of law issues, in the case of Poland, for example, there were some very debatable issues. But it seems in this case, there is a big, sort of, it seems pretty clear. And so we'll be watching that with some interest. Can I just ask one last question before we turn it over to the audience for questions? And sort of this question of public opinion. So when Fico won re-election, so he left office in disgrace, and then partially because there was a lot of anti-American rhetoric there. He hasn't spoken particularly favorably about the United States ever. I think when he was with recently, he was talking about how that Slovakia was under the current, under the then government was not sovereign and under the absolute influence of the United States, which is really kind of an absurd statement. Because I mean, if we were nearly as influential in Slovakia as he says we are, alleges we are, then Slovakia would look very different. There wouldn't be very much. There would be none of the sort of this very heavy pro-Putin, pro-Russia sentiment. There would be a lot more. The United States would be viewed with a lot more favor because there's a lot of anti-American sentiment in your country. And so the question is, I mean, so what can be done about all this? Because I mean, the United States did play a role in brokering the emergence of Czechoslovakia as a country. It seems to me we maybe deserve a tiny bit of credit for that. I mean, and we've been treaty allies now for quite some time. I mean, the relationships, and but there's this persistent anti-Americanism and coming particularly from his kind of camp. And it worries me, but it's also the denigration of Western institutions, the openness to Putin and his messaging, and some of the other kind of uglier voices out there. And so I mean, it's been an issue for some time. You're very aware of it, but what can be done to address that? Because it's been bothering me for some time.
It's been bothering a lot of people in the Western world, and for a good reason, and I think it's good that it's bothering us. I had a good debate, actually, this morning with one of a former congressman, and I think it was also senator, in U.S., and he said, and I very much appreciated, that the politicians who want to keep the power for the sake of power, being in power, they actually touch two emotions, anger and fear. Because when you actually are able to put people into anger and fear, they usually switch off, not they usually, it's psychologically approved, they switch off their brain. Because you go into you have to protect yourself. So you stop thinking. And when you stop thinking, you're not rational. If you're not rational, and if you're a good leader that can provide for your emotions, then you can guide the people anywhere you want. And I think we see more and more the polarization that we see present in Slovakia, in Europe, but I see it also here, from what I hear, that the politicians from the parties don't even speak, or they would not appear next to each other because it would be not being appreciated by their voters. So this is the strategy and the tactics that they use to keep the power, and that's why we say divide and rule. So that's what we see, division among people so they can keep the power, which goes against the principles of democracy, as we said. So yeah, I think of that very often, but I think it's important that politicians who are rather moderate, our Madam President said that, and we use that very often, that being polite is not a weakness. And we have to think of that, because now when you see, it's like the more you root, the better leader you are. Is it true? Is this what the leader is about? Being rude, courageous, but courageous means rude. Because courage, it's not about strong words, it's about strong action. That's courage. But we hear many times strong messages like Robert Fico, stop the support to Ukraine. And then you see like, oh, you didn't. But many people, his voters don't really follow the action, they rather follow the words. So I think it's time to, and the call to action is that people with rather moderate language will stand up and start to say, no, let's look at the roots of the action of these people, and let's basically name the truth, what's about, and let's talk about the strategy, because these politicians of working with your emotions, if you bring them to the playing field or the battlefield of strategy, they lost. Because if you don't have vision, you cannot build a strategy. And if you bring them to the debate about strategy or about vision, they will be quiet, or they will again hit on your emotions, cause fear or anger. So I think it's important to people like you to speak up and really catch the audience, and just it's going to be a lot of groundwork. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to take a minute, but it's definitely important to continue speak about the truth and basically address all the disinformation that is present that we see around Europe, but we see it, as I see, also here in the United States.
Well, we could continue this conversation for a long time and drill down even deeper on some of the issues that I'm afraid we almost had time to skate over. But why don't we just we don't have a huge amount of time left, but we do have a few hands raised. So shall we turn it over to you, our guest in person, young man in the front row.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this event. I would like to know, as a fellow European, you have deep insights into the inner functions of the mechanisms of the European Union. How optimistic are you that the EU can actually keep up its support for Ukraine? Because the package that was just agreed upon is a huge win. But I have a feeling that the EU will have to bear the burden of financing this war because the US, for several reasons, is not prepared to invest a whole lot of money, or at least parts of the US political class is not prepared to invest any more money.
Well, again, what I learned during the last 3 years: never give up. Never give up. Yeah, you're right. You described it well, but it can be changed. Look at the Ukrainians. 30 days, now we are over 700. So don't take what you see as something that cannot be changed. The good thing is that in Poland, Donald Tusk is a new prime minister, but Poland in general has been very supportive. It's a country with strong influence, big country, strong economy.
Very supportive.
The Baltic countries very strongly. And the reason they voice their voice is not because they want to have a better economy, but they understand, they know who is Vladimir Putin. So that's why we got the audience of the Western countries, because we were explaining to the leaders out of our history what we experienced, and that made the difference. That's why I said always go back in the history, use examples, and don't get by the leaders who want to be pragmatic to lead you in misunderstandings, because that's their intention. So I think I am optimistic. There is still a lot of people that knows where's the north, as we say, so they understand it's very strategic, and I think it's for US. You need to say it as well. It's an investment. You're gonna miss this investment. Because investment has return, value return, but also economical return, security return. Don't look at it as, okay, I'm feeding this. Who do I don't know. I mean, it's not expenditure. It's an investment. So when you say bear, yeah, it might end up that Europe will have to bear this investment, but it's going to be a missed opportunity for US, because it's all about values. And if we name it this way, then it's easier to discuss with your citizens. Because this is a battlefield, this is a role model. It's going to be a role model for the whole world, for the future. And there is going to be conflicts around the world. And we're going to have a very well role model that we can roll out and say, okay, this is how the unity is being built. These are the instruments of the unity: sanctions, military aid, humanitarian aid, etc. We're basically building a contingency plan for the future. And if you are not going to be part of it, that contingency plan is not going to be as good. So it needs to be named this way. That's why I'm optimistic. If people will speak up and will look at it from this perspective, we're good. If we start to become pragmatic, you know what, this is over, they cannot make it, then they will not make it. That's all it is.
Next question, you, sir, second row.
Yeah, thank you. Does Slovakia have a large ethnic Russian population?
No, what we have...
And how well have they integrated with the society?
Well, we have called Rusins, which is kind of the same foundation, and it's, yeah, you would consider they speak this old kind of Russian. So yes, they are, but they consider them Slovak citizens, so they don't connect with Russia necessarily immediately, even though there might be some tradition. We have Orthodox Church present in the eastern Slovakia, but again, it's not such a big group, it's not a strong group, and they don't even feel like supporting immediately Russia. That's not at all. But what we see, since Facebook is really the biggest social platform in Slovakia, and we see that a lot of people without any base of ethnics, nationality, etc., doesn't matter, man, woman, doesn't matter, children. It's more about critical thinking, whether you know how to discern if that's what you see is true or not. So we've been missing this because our education system doesn't really teach the critical thinking. So that's where we are losing this battle, that people are influenced by a lot of disinformation and misinformation, and they believe it. And that's why the growth of the sentiment toward Russia was present in Slovakia, and we just have to step against it in a proper way, but in a moderate way. Because if you start to be aggressive, you see it only helps to polarize those groups, and then it's a battle, and it's like a spiral. You don't want that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Dan.
Hi, sir. Thanks for coming and talking to us. I have a question kind of based off of what you had just mentioned about the disinformation. I mean, certainly no doubt disinformation plays a role, but it seems like there needs to be kind of a fertile ground for the message to resonate. What kind of explains the kind of the irrational nationalism that's driving people to, sympathize with what could be, described as the real threat to state sovereignty? Is it backlash to the EU, feeling like you're getting pushed along with some kind of higher prerogative, migration? Is it, a desire for a return to normalcy, something like that? Or they just like the entertainment of having a prime minister who's combative, controversial?
I think it's a mixture, and you basically named the whole. Or we could add something more. But if you look at it from a distance and you look for the one denominator, the result is the result of the emotions. So basically, you're missing when you said the rational, or I don't know how you said it, pragmatic rationale or something. So irrationality, pragmatic irrationality. So yeah, I mean, people think much more through their emotions and less really think. And we have to go back into the debates about the facts and prove the facts and battle for the facts and learn or teach the people to ask these questions before we really accept anything as being truth. The relativism, growing relativism, and these are, I think, the challenges that we face, and that's why it's so difficult, and the people of expertise, etc., are losing at this moment, because the politicians, as I said, they attack anger and fear, they switch off your brain, and boom, there you are. And it's surprising that many really educated people are also victims of this, that they, when you listen to them, they go like, but how can you have this opinion knowing so many things? Because then they speak out of their emotions. So it's a challenge to face it, definitely. And I think the digital world or digital era, but the digital world we are part of, we didn't realize how much we are not prepared. We weren't prepared for stepping into this digital world. There's so much content that you yourself face. And it's like we're still learning how to prevent receiving certain information, because they have influence on us whether we want or not. So this is what we need to learn, and in the meantime, like I said, the people who know how to work with the emotions will kind of have their treat in the upcoming years, but we should not give up.
Well, on that note, I think we're starting to reach the bewitching hour. So maybe we should just thank you very much for coming in to visit us today. Thank you for your observations, your very helpful to as we grapple with this massive problem of what to do with Putin's Russia and the effect it has on the European security order, which of course has all sorts of implications for U.S. interests as well. And so thank you again for coming, and let's give you our visitor one round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Yeah, maybe last comment before